The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on my 25th birthday. Sorry, kiddo, couldn't make it today. Business emergency. Rain check? 12 hours after my birthday dinner had ended. 12 hours after I'd stared at the empty chair I'd reserved for him at Romano's. 12 hours after I'd blown out candles alone, while my friends awkwardly sang happy birthday. But that wasn't even the best part. 3 months later, this same man had the audacity to call me, asking for $60,000 to save his precious mansion. You want to know what I did? I laughed, hard. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Let me paint you a picture of Marcus Delwood, my father. Picture a man who's spent his entire life chasing status symbols, like a dog chasing cars. Designer suits that cost more than most people's rent. A Rolex collection that could fund a small country. And a house. No, let's call it what it is. A monument to his own ego that sits on 12 acres in the most exclusive neighborhood in Westchester County. Growing up, I was Mitchell Delwood, son of the great Marcus Delwood, real estate mogul extraordinaire. At least, that's how he introduced me to his golf buddies and business associates. To everyone else, I was just the kid who got dropped off at school events by whatever assistant wasn't busy that week. Because Marcus was always closing another deal, always networking at another event, always building his empire. The pattern started early. I was 7 when he missed my Little League championship game because a potential client wanted to see a property. I was 12 when he forgot to pick me up from summer camp, leaving me sitting on my duffel bag for 3 hours until my camp counselor drove me home personally. I was 16 when he promised to teach me to drive, then hired a driving instructor instead because he had back-to-back meetings all weekend. But birthdays? Birthdays were supposed to be different. Or so I thought. On my 18th birthday, he showed up 2 hours late to my own party with a business associate in tow, spent the entire time on a conference call, and left before we cut the cake. He handed me an envelope with a check and said, "Buy yourself something nice, son, Dad's gotta run." The check was generous, $5,000, but I would have traded every penny for him to stay and actually celebrate with me. College years brought a brief reprieve, mainly because I was 3 states away at Northwestern studying engineering. He'd call on my birthday, send money, and that felt like enough. Distance has a way of making emotional absence feel normal. I threw myself into my studies, made friends who became my chosen family, and learned to stop expecting more than Marcus Delwood was capable of giving. After graduation, I moved to Chicago and landed a job at a renewable energy firm. Good pay, meaningful work, and a life that was entirely my own. I was building something real, something that mattered, while Marcus continued his endless pursuit of bigger deals and flashier acquisitions. The mansion, his crown jewel, came into the picture when I was 23. He'd been living in a perfectly respectable 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, but apparently that wasn't enough for a man of his stature. He found this sprawling estate that had belonged to some old-money family who'd fallen on hard times. 15 rooms, a 3-car garage, a swimming pool that looked like it belonged at a resort, and grounds that required a full-time landscaping crew. "Mitch, you should see this place," he told me over the phone, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. "It's got history, character, presence. This is the kind of house that makes a statement." "What kind of statement is that, Dad?" "That Marcus Delwood has arrived." I should have known then that he was overextending himself, but Marcus had always lived large and somehow made it work. He had this ability to talk his way into deals, to convince banks and investors that he was worth the risk. His charisma was his superpower, and he wielded it like a weapon in every business negotiation. The house purchase went through, and suddenly Marcus was living like a king in his castle. He threw parties that made the society pages, hosted business dinners that sealed million-dollar deals, and generally used the mansion as both his home and his most effective business tool. Every room was perfectly decorated by some high-end interior designer, every detail calculated to impress. Meanwhile, our relationship continued its predictable dance. He'd call when he needed something, usually for me to handle some technical issue with his various properties, or to review contracts with my engineering background. I'd visit twice a year, Christmas and one weekend in the summer, staying in one of the mansion's many guest rooms, and marveling at how empty such a large house could feel. Last year, something shifted. The calls became more frequent, but they weren't about business. Marcus started asking about my job, my life in Chicago, whether I was dating anyone. He seemed almost lonely. I attributed it to him getting older, maybe finally realizing that all his success meant nothing without people to share it with. That's why, when my 25th birthday rolled around, I decided to make a real effort. Instead of our usual phone call check-in, I suggested we celebrate together. Really celebrate. I'd drive up to New York. We'd go to a nice restaurant, maybe spend the weekend catching up like actual father and son. That sounds great, Mitch, he said, and for the first time in years, he actually sounded like he meant it. Let me check my calendar and we'll make a plan. We settled on Romano's, this Italian place he'd discovered that had supposedly become his new favorite spot. He insisted on making the reservation himself, promised he'd cleared his entire Saturday for us. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe Marcus Delwood was finally ready to be a dad, instead of just a successful businessman who happened to have a son. I drove the 4 hours from Chicago to New York with a genuine smile on my face. Booked a hotel room near the restaurant, even bought a new shirt for the occasion. 25 felt like a milestone birthday, the kind that deserved celebration, and for once it seemed like my father agreed. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, typical March weather in New York. I spent the morning walking around the city, killing time until our 6 o'clock dinner reservation. Around 4, I texted Marcus. Looking forward to tonight, Dad. See you at 6. 6 o'clock came and went. The hostess at Romano's kept glancing at me sympathetically as I sat alone at a table for 2, checking my phone every 30 seconds. I ordered an appetizer to buy time, then another. My phone remained stubbornly silent. 7 o'clock. Still nothing. I called his number twice, straight to voicemail both times. 8 o'clock. The restaurant was filling up with the dinner crowd, and I could see the staff getting antsy about my table. I ordered an entree, ate mechanically while scrolling through my contacts, wondering if I should call his office, his assistant, someone who might know where he was. 9:30. I paid the check, left a generous tip for the server who'd been pretending not to notice my increasingly pathetic situation, and walked back to my hotel in the rain. My phone buzzed once. A text from my college friend Jake wishing me happy birthday. I'd forgotten to mention my dinner plans to anyone, which now felt like a blessing. At least nobody else knew about this latest disappointment. That's when Marcus's text finally arrived. 11:47 p.m., just 13 minutes before my birthday officially ended. Sorry, kiddo, couldn't make it today. Business emergency. Rain check. I stared at that message for a long time, sitting on the edge of my hotel bed in my new shirt that nobody had seen, holding the small gift I'd bought for him, a vintage photo of Chicago's skyline from the 1920s, something for his office. The casualness of it, the complete lack of acknowledgement about what he'd done, the assumption that a rain check would somehow make this okay. It crystallized something I'd been trying not to see for years. Marcus Delwood was never going to change. He was never going to choose me over whatever business opportunity came his way. He was never going to be the father I'd spent 25 years hoping he might become. I drove back to Chicago the next morning without responding to his text, without calling, without any of the angry confrontation I'd imagined having. What was the point? This was who he was, who he'd always been. I was done expecting anything different. 3 months later, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening in June. Marcus Delwood's name flashed on the screen, and for a split second, I considered not answering. But curiosity won out. "Mitch, how's my boy doing?" The forced cheerfulness in his voice was immediate and obvious. This wasn't a social call. "I'm fine, Dad. What's up?" "Listen, son, I've got a bit of a situation here, and I was hoping you might be able to help your old man out." Here we go, I thought. Another technical problem with one of his properties. Or maybe he needed me to review some contracts. But what came next was so much better than I could have imagined. "The thing is, Mitch, the real estate market's been a bit unpredictable lately. You know how these things go. Cyclical business, ups and downs." I could practically hear him pacing around that massive marble foyer of his, the one with the crystal chandelier that cost more than my annual salary. Marcus always paced when he was nervous, and the echo in that cavernous entryway would be amplifying every footstep. "Okay," I said slowly, settling into my couch in my modest Chicago apartment. Through my window, I could see normal people coming home from normal jobs to normal-sized homes. What kind of help are we talking about? Well, you know the mansion has been such an asset for my business. All my major deals happen there. The dinner parties, the networking events, the client meetings. It's not just a house, son. It's my office, my brand, my entire professional identity wrapped up in one magnificent property. The way he said magnificent made my skin crawl. Even now, even when he was clearly in trouble, he couldn't resist bragging about that house. "Dad, cut to the chase. What do you need?" A pause. Then, in a voice that tried to sound casual but missed by about a mile, "I need $60,000. I blinked, then blinked again. $60,000 wasn't pocket change. But for Marcus Delwood, real estate mogul with multiple properties and decades of supposedly successful deals, it should have been manageable. Unless, $60,000 for what exactly? A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The mortgage payment. Well, payments, plural. I'm a few months behind and the bank is getting antsy. You know how these financial institutions can be? No vision, no understanding of the bigger picture. They want their money now, not when the market turns around. A few months behind, in a mansion. I did some quick mental math based on what I knew about property values in Westchester County. His monthly mortgage payment had to be astronomical. How many months behind, Dad? Another pause. Longer this time. 6, maybe 7. The exact number isn't really important, Mitch. What matters is that I can fix this situation with a little temporary assistance from my son, and then everything goes back to normal. 7 months behind on a mortgage that probably ran $15,000 to $20,000 a month. My engineering brain started calculating. He wasn't just asking me for $60,000 to catch up on payments. He was asking me to temporarily patch a hole in a sinking ship that was taking on water faster than anyone could bail it out. Dad, if you're 7 months behind on your mortgage, how exactly is $60,000 going to solve this problem? What happens next month when you can't make the payment again? Mitch, I've got deals in the pipeline. Big deals. There's a commercial development project that's going to close any day now. We're talking about a commission that'll set me up for the next 5 years. And the Henderson property downtown is finally ready to list. Once these deals close, I'll be able to pay you back immediately and get caught up on everything. I'd heard this song before. Marcus always had deals in the pipeline, projects about to close, big paydays just around the corner. The difference was that in the past, somehow he'd always managed to pull it off. His combination of charm, persistence, and sheer audacity had carried him through plenty of tight spots before. But this felt different. There was a desperation in his voice I'd never heard before, a crack in that usually unshakable confidence. What about your other properties? Don't you have rental income coming in? Well, that's part of the current situation. The market downturn hit the rental sector pretty hard. I've got 3 units sitting empty, and the tenants in my other properties are, let's say they're taking advantage of the current eviction moratorium situation. Translation: his tenants weren't paying rent, and he couldn't evict them. The picture was getting clearer, and it wasn't pretty. Dad, let me get this straight. You're behind on your mortgage, you've got empty rental units, your current tenants aren't paying, and you want me to give you $60,000 based on deals that haven't closed yet? Not give, Mitch, loan. This is a loan we're talking about. Father to son, family helping family. I'll have the money back to you within 60 days, guaranteed. I almost laughed right then. Almost. The absurdity of Marcus Delwood asking his son, the son whose birthday he'd blown off 3 months ago, for a bailout, was almost too perfect. But I managed to keep my voice steady. 60 days? Guaranteed? Absolutely. Look, Mitch, I know I haven't always been the most attentive father. I know I've made mistakes, prioritized work over family more than I should have. But this is different. This is me coming to you not just as a businessman, but as a father who needs his son's help. Now he wanted to play the family card. Now, when his back was against the wall and his precious mansion was on the line, suddenly he remembered he had a son. When exactly did you realize you were in this much trouble? It's been building for a while. The pandemic really hurt the commercial real estate sector. And then when the market started shifting, a lot of my clients got nervous. Deals that should have closed got put on hold. Properties that should have sold are just sitting there. How long is a while, Dad? Silence. Then, maybe since last fall. Last fall. He'd known he was in serious financial trouble since last fall, and he'd still blown off my birthday dinner in March. He'd been struggling to keep his head above water for months, probably losing sleep over mortgage payments and empty properties, and when I'd reached out to spend time with him, actual time, not asking for anything, just wanting to connect, he'd chosen some phantom business emergency instead. So you've known about this for 8 months. Mitch, you have to understand, I kept thinking I could turn it around on my own. I've always been able to figure things out, to make the deals work. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Burden me with his problems. But apparently it was perfectly fine to burden me with his absence, his broken promises, his complete inability to show up when it mattered. What about your other assets? The car collection, the art, the antiques you're always talking about? Most of that is already leveraged. I took out loans against the artwork last year, and the cars are collateral for a business line of credit. Of course they were. Marcus had borrowed against everything he owned to maintain his lifestyle and keep his business afloat. The mansion wasn't just his home, it was the last asset standing between him and complete financial collapse. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Of course, son, anything. If I don't give you this money, what happens? The silence stretched so long, I thought the call might have dropped. Mitch, let's not think about that. Let's focus on the solution, not the problem. No, Dad, I want to know. What happens to the house if you don't catch up on these payments? The bank would probably initiate foreclosure proceedings. Probably. He was losing his house, the symbol of everything he'd worked for, the monument to his success, and he was still trying to downplay it. When? When what? When would they start foreclosure proceedings? Another long pause. They already have. They already have. Those 3 words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had already burned down half the house. I sat there in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. You're telling me that foreclosure proceedings are already underway and you're just mentioning this now? Mitch, it's just paperwork, legal formalities, nothing that can't be reversed if we act quickly. Legal formalities. My father was about to lose his $1 million mansion to foreclosure, and he was calling it a legal formality. How long do you have? The sheriff's sale is scheduled for August 15th. I grabbed a pen and did the math on the back of an envelope. June 20th today, August 15th. Less than 2 months. He wasn't asking for $60,000 to get current on his mortgage. He was asking for $60,000 to stop a sheriff's sale that was already scheduled. Dad, even if you catch up on the missed payments, what makes you think you'll be able to keep making the payments going forward? That's where the beauty of this plan comes in, son. Once I stabilize the situation, I can refinance the property. Interest rates have come down, and with my credit history, I should be able to get a much better deal. His credit history. The man was 7 months behind on his mortgage, had leveraged every asset he owned, and somehow thought his credit history was going to help him refinance. What's your current mortgage payment? $18,000 a month. $18,000 every month. I made decent money as an engineer, but that was more than half my annual salary just for his mortgage payment. Dad, that's over $200,000 a year just for your house payment. It's an investment, Mitch. The property appreciates, I use it for business purposes, it's a tax write-off. You can't think about real estate the same way you think about regular expenses. Even now, even facing foreclosure, he was trying to justify the unjustifiable. Marcus had bought a house he couldn't afford to impress people he barely knew, and now he wanted his son to subsidize his delusions of grandeur. What about the commercial development deal you mentioned? When is that supposed to close? Any day now. The developers are just waiting for final approval from the City Planning Commission. It's a formality, really. Everything was a formality with Marcus. Foreclosure proceedings, city planning approvals, his expectation that I would hand over $60,000 to save his mansion. And the Henderson property? Beautiful piece of commercial real estate in downtown White Plains. Prime location, tons of potential. I've got 3 serious buyers looking at it. 3 serious buyers looking at a property that hadn't sold yet, just like the development deal that was waiting for approval that might or might not come through. Marcus was asking me to bet $60,000 on hypothetical future income from speculative business deals. Dad, I need to think about this. Of course. Take your time. Well, not too much time, obviously, given the timeline we're working with. As if this was some collaborative project we'd embarked on together, instead of him calling me out of the blue asking for more money than most people see in a year. I'll call you back tomorrow. Mitch, wait, there's one more thing I should mention. Of course there was. The $60,000 isn't just for the mortgage. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What else, Dad? There are some other associated costs. Legal fees for the foreclosure defense. Penalties and late charges from the bank. Property taxes that are coming due. Insurance premiums. The total amount needed to completely resolve the situation is closer to $85,000. He'd asked for $60, then casually tacked on another $25 like he was adding guacamole to a burrito order. Is there anything else you haven't told me? No, that's everything. $85,000 resolves everything completely. Clean slate, fresh start. And you'll pay me back in 60 days. Guaranteed, son. Absolutely guaranteed. After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the wall for about an hour. My modest Chicago apartment suddenly felt luxurious compared to my father's impending financial disaster. I had money in savings, not $85,000, but I could probably scrape it together if I liquidated some investments and borrowed against my 401k. The question wasn't whether I could help him. The question was whether I should. I thought about that empty chair at Romano's, about sitting alone in that restaurant while other families celebrated around me. I thought about every missed Little League game, every forgotten school event, every time Marcus had chosen business over his son. I thought about his casual dismissal of my birthday, the throwaway text message that had arrived almost at midnight. But mostly, I thought about the pattern. Marcus creates a crisis through his own poor decisions, then expects other people to fix it for him. He'd probably done this with business partners, investors, banks, and anyone else who'd been willing to bail him out over the years. Now he was doing it with his son. I called my friend Jake, the one who'd texted me on my birthday. Hypothetically, I said, if your father asked you for $85,000 to save his house from foreclosure, what would you do? Hypothetically, I'd ask him where my invitation to live in that house had been for the past 25 years. He's family, though. So are you. Where was his family loyalty when you needed it? Jake had a point. I'd never asked Marcus for anything significant. Not college tuition, not help with my apartment deposit, not even career advice. I'd made my own way in the world while he built his empire. Now that the empire was crumbling, suddenly family mattered. I spent the evening researching foreclosure law in New York. The process was exactly as dire as Marcus had made it sound. Once that sheriff's sale happened, the house would be gone. No do-overs, no second chances, no last-minute heroics. The bank would recover what they could, and Marcus would be left with whatever equity remained after legal fees and penalties. Given what he owed and what the house might actually sell for in a forced sale, there probably wouldn't be much equity left. I also looked up property records online. The mansion had been purchased for $2.8 million. Marcus had put down 20%, so his original mortgage was around $2.2 million. Even with payments over the past few years, he probably still owed close to $2 million. If the house sold at a sheriff's sale for anything less than that amount, he'd still owe the bank money. $85,000 wouldn't save him. It would just delay the inevitable while adding me to his list of creditors. The next morning, I called Marcus back. Dad, I've been thinking about your situation. Excellent, son. I knew I could count on you. Should I give you my bank account information, or would you prefer to wire the money directly to the mortgage company? He'd already assumed I was going to say yes. Of course he had. Actually, Dad, I have some questions first. Sure, whatever you need to know. How much is the house actually worth? Well, the assessed value for tax purposes is $2.6 million, but in the current market, with all the improvements I've made, it's easily worth $3 million, maybe more. $3 million maybe, minus the $2 million he owed, minus the $85,000 in arrears and fees, minus the costs of actually selling the property. Even in the best-case scenario, he was looking at maybe breaking even. And if these deals you're waiting on don't close, they will, Mitch. I guarantee it. There was that word again. Guarantee. Marcus threw it around like it actually meant something. But if they don't? Son, let's focus on positive outcomes here. Negative thinking doesn't help anyone. He was asking for $85,000 and didn't want to discuss what would happen if his imaginary deals fell through. This was Marcus Delwood in a nutshell. Always confident, always optimistic, always assuming everything would work out because it always had before. Except this time felt different. This time the consequences were real and immediate and couldn't be charmed away with a confident handshake and a good story. Dad, I need you to be honest with me about something. Of course. If I give you this money and your deals don't close, how are you going to pay me back? The pause was so long I started to wonder if he'd hung up. Mitch, that's not going to be an issue. But if it was? Son, I'm asking for your trust here. I'm asking you to believe in your father. Trust. After a lifetime of broken promises and missed birthdays and empty chairs, he wanted my trust. And $85,000. Son, I'm asking for your trust here. I'm asking you to believe in your father. I stared out my apartment window at Lake Michigan, watching sailboats drift across the water on a perfect summer afternoon. Normal people were having normal Tuesdays, going to work, paying their reasonable mortgages, living within their means. None of them were getting phone calls, asking them to bankroll their father's fantasy lifestyle. Dad, when's the last time you asked me how I'm doing? What do you mean? I mean, when's the last time you called me just to see how I was? Not because you needed something, not because you had a business question, just because you wanted to talk to your son? Another long pause. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out where this was going and how it related to his financial crisis. Mitch, I call you all the time. When you need something, yes. You call when you need me to review contracts, or help with technical problems, or explain how some new gadget works. But when's the last time you asked about my job, my life, whether I'm happy? Of course I care about those things. You know I do. Do I? Because 3 months ago, when I drove 4 hours to have dinner with you for my birthday, you couldn't be bothered to show up. But now that you need $85,000, suddenly you're calling me son and talking about family. That birthday dinner, Mitch, I explained that. There was an emergency. What emergency? Silence. Dad, what was the emergency that was so important you couldn't have dinner with your son on his 25th birthday? There was a client situation. The Pemberton deal was falling apart, and I had to handle some last-minute negotiations. I pulled up my laptop and did a quick search. It took about 30 seconds to find what I was looking for. Dad, the Pemberton commercial property was sold to DevCorp Industries on March 10th. My birthday was March 15th. The deal was already closed. The silence stretched so long I could hear him breathing. There were some post-closing issues that needed to be addressed. On a Saturday night? Issues so urgent they couldn't wait until Monday? Mitch, why are we rehashing ancient history? The important thing is that I need your help now, and family helps family. Ancient history. My 25th birthday was ancient history, but his mortgage payment was a family emergency. You want to know what I think happened that night, Dad? What? I think you got a better offer. I think some client or potential business partner invited you to something more interesting than dinner with your son, and you chose that instead. Just like you've been choosing business over family my entire life. That's not fair, Mitch. Everything I've done, all the work, all the long hours, it's all been for you, to build something, to leave you a legacy. A legacy. The man was facing foreclosure and still talking about legacy. What legacy is that exactly? A mansion you can't afford? A business built on borrowing against everything you own? Or maybe the legacy of teaching your son that family only matters when you need something from them. You're being emotional, son. I understand you're upset about the birthday thing, but we can't let personal feelings interfere with practical decisions. Personal feelings. He was asking me for $85,000 and dismissing my personal feelings as an interference. Dad, let me ask you something else. If our situations were reversed, if I called you tomorrow asking for $85,000 to save my apartment, would you give it to me? Of course I would. Without hesitation. Really, because when I was in college and my laptop died right before finals week, I asked you for $800 to replace it. You told me it would be a good learning experience to figure it out myself. That was different. That was about teaching you responsibility and self-reliance. And when I wanted to do a study abroad program in Germany but couldn't afford it, you said travel was a luxury I'd have to earn for myself. Those were character-building experiences, Mitch. They made you stronger. Character-building experiences. But bailing him out of a foreclosure caused by his own financial recklessness was family loyalty. So when I needed help, it was about building character. But when you need help, it's about family. Do I have that right? This is different. This is a crisis situation. My laptop dying before finals wasn't a crisis. Mitch, you're missing the bigger picture here. This isn't just about me. This house, this business, it's all part of something larger. When I'm gone, all of this will be yours. You'll inherit the properties, the business relationships, everything I've built. When he was gone, now he was playing the mortality card. Dad, what exactly would I be inheriting? A bunch of properties mortgaged to the hilt? Business relationships with people who only deal with you because of your reputation, which is currently in freefall? What am I inheriting except your debts? The real estate market will recover, it always does. These properties will be worth a fortune someday. And until then, I'll be making $18,000 mortgage payments on a house that's bigger than most office buildings. You could sell it, downsize, use the equity for other investments. What equity? You just told me you owe almost $2 million on a house that might be worth $3 million in a perfect market. After selling costs and capital gains taxes, there might not be any equity left. I could hear him starting to pace again. The footsteps echoed through that massive foyer, each step costing him about $50 at his current burn rate. Mitch, I think you're overcomplicating this. It's a simple loan. Family to family, $85,000 now, full repayment in 60 days when my deals close. Simple loan. There was nothing simple about any of this. What happens if I say no? What do you mean? I mean, what happens to us, to our relationship, if I don't give you this money? Why would you say no? I'm your father. He hadn't answered the question, which was an answer in itself. Dad, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think your deals are going to close. I think you're in a lot more trouble than you're admitting, even to yourself. And I think $85,000 isn't going to save you. It's just going to delay the inevitable while dragging me down with you. That's a terrible thing to say to your father. Is it? Or is it the first honest conversation we've had in years? I raised you, Mitch. I put a roof over your head, food on your table, paid for your education. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for a lot, Dad. But it doesn't entitle you to $85,000 25 years later. And it doesn't erase a lifetime of putting business before family. So that's it? You're gonna let your father lose his house over some grudge about missed birthdays and school events? A grudge. That's what he thought this was. Dad, this isn't about grudges, this is about patterns. This is about you making promises you don't keep and expecting other people to fix the consequences of your choices. I kept plenty of promises. Name one. The silence that followed was deafening. You promised to teach me to drive. You hired an instructor instead. You promised to come to my graduation. You sent your assistant a gift card. You promised to have dinner with me on my birthday. You sent a text message at midnight. I was building a business, Mitch. Everything I did was so you could have a better life than I had. Did you ever ask me what kind of life I wanted? What do you mean? I mean, did you ever consider that maybe I didn't need you to build an empire? Maybe I just needed you to show up. The pacing had stopped. For the first time in this entire conversation, Marcus Delwood was completely quiet. It's too late for that now, he said finally, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. It doesn't have to be, but it starts with you being honest about this situation, and honest about what kind of father you've been. And it definitely doesn't start with me writing you a check for $85,000 to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. So you won't help me. I won't enable you, there's a difference. What's that supposed to mean? It means if you want to have a relationship with me, it starts with you losing the house. It means if you want to have a relationship with me, it starts with you losing the house. The words hung in the air between us, transmitted across 400 miles of fiber optic cable, carrying more weight than any conversation we'd ever had. You want me to lose my house? I want you to face reality. That house isn't your home, Dad, it's your prison. It's the reason you can't retire, can't relax, can't have a normal conversation with your son without calculating how it might benefit your next deal. This house is everything I've worked for. No, it's everything you've worked for instead of working on being a father. I heard something crash in the background. Probably Marcus throwing something or knocking over one of his expensive decorative objects. Good. Maybe breaking something would help him understand how broken this whole situation was. You don't understand what you're asking me to give up. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to give up an $18,000 monthly payment you can't afford. A property tax bill that's probably more than most people's salaries. And a house so big you need a staff to maintain it. I'm asking you to give up the financial stress that's consuming your life. And what am I supposed to do then? Move into some apartment like a college student? The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. Marcus Delwood, who'd been living beyond his means for years, was too good for an apartment. You could buy a nice 3-bedroom house for $300,000, pay cash, no mortgage, no monthly payment hanging over your head. You could actually enjoy your retirement instead of spending it scrambling to make payments on a house that's bigger than most hotels. I'm not ready to retire. Dad, you're 68 years old and facing foreclosure. I'd say retirement is choosing you whether you're ready or not. I still have good years left. I can rebuild. And there it was. The delusion that had gotten him into this mess in the first place. Marcus genuinely believed he could start over at 68, rebuild his empire, and somehow avoid the financial realities that were closing in around him. Rebuild with what money? The equity from the house sale will give me seed capital for new investments. What equity? You owe $2 million on a house that might sell for $2.2 million if you're lucky. After closing costs, realtor fees, and legal expenses, you'll be lucky to break even. The house is worth more than that. To who? You've been trying to refinance it for months, which means banks don't think it's worth what you owe on it. And even if it was worth $3 million, that's only $1 million in equity. At your current burn rate, that would last you maybe 3 years. 3 years is enough time to get back on my feet. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. This was like arguing with someone who insisted the sky was green. Marcus had spent so many years bending reality to fit his needs that he'd lost the ability to see what was actually happening. Dad, what happened to the Henderson property you were going to sell? What do you mean, what happened to it? It's still for sale. For how long? These things take time, Mitch. Commercial real estate isn't like selling a car. How long has it been on the market? Silence. Dad, about 14 months. 14 months. The property he was counting on to save his financial situation had been sitting unsold for over a year. And the commercial development deal that's supposed to close any day? That's a legitimate opportunity. The developers are serious buyers. How long have you been working on that deal? Since last summer. Last summer. Another phantom deal that had been about to close for almost a year. Dad, do you hear yourself? You're asking me to bet $85,000 on 2 deals that have been going nowhere for over a year. These things take time. No, Dad, failed deals take time. Successful deals close. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably trying to control his temper. Marcus had never been good at hearing things he didn't want to hear. So what are you suggesting I do, Mitchell? Just give up? Let them take everything I've worked for. I'm suggesting you take control of the situation before it takes control of you. Sell the house yourself, before the foreclosure. You'll get a better price, have more time to find a buyer, and avoid the legal mess of a sheriff's sale. And then what? Then you buy a house you can actually afford and start living like a normal person instead of a character in some fantasy about being a real estate mogul. I am a real estate mogul. No, Dad, you were a real estate mogul. Now you're a 68-year-old man who can't make his mortgage payment. The silence that followed was so complete I wondered if he'd hung up. But finally he spoke, and his voice was different, smaller, older. You really won't help me. I really won't enable you. What's the difference? Helping you would be offering to co-sign a loan for a house you could actually afford. Enabling you is giving you money to keep living in a fantasy. This isn't a fantasy, Mitch. This is my life. Your life is about to become a foreclosure proceeding and a bankruptcy filing if you don't wake up. You sound like you'd enjoy that. And there it was, the accusation I'd been waiting for. When Marcus couldn't get what he wanted through charm or manipulation or guilt, he went straight to making his opponent the villain. I wouldn't enjoy it. But I won't prevent it either. You created this situation, Dad. You chose to buy a house you couldn't afford. You chose to leverage every asset you owned, and you chose to ignore the warning signs for months. Those were your choices. I thought my son would support me. I thought my father would show up for my birthday. The silence stretched between us again, heavy with 25 years of accumulated disappointment and resentment. So that's what this is really about, he said finally. You're punishing me for missing your birthday. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud, which seemed to catch him off guard. Dad, you think this is about one missed birthday? You think I'd let you lose your house over a single broken promise? Isn't it? It's about 25 years of broken promises. It's about a lifetime of being your son in name only. It's about you calling me now, not because you want a relationship, but because you need money. And mostly it's about you still not understanding the difference. I love you, Mitch. You're my son. I know you love me, Dad, but you love that house more. You love your business deals more. You love your image and your status and your lifestyle more. And I'm done pretending that's enough. What do you want from me? Baishi lady, nothing. That's the point. I don't want anything from you anymore. I'm not waiting for you to change. I'm not hoping you'll suddenly become a different person, and I'm not going to bankroll your delusions. If you lose this house, maybe you'll finally have room in your life for something real. Maybe you'll move into a normal house and learn how to be a normal person. Maybe you'll call me just to talk instead of just when you need something. You think losing everything will make me a better father? I think losing everything you think matters might help you figure out what actually does matter. And what if it doesn't? What if I lose the house and nothing changes? Then at least I'll know I didn't enable another few years of this insanity. You're gambling with your father's life? No, Dad, you already gambled with your life. You lost. I'm just refusing to double down on your bad bet. The conversation ended shortly after that. No dramatic declarations, no slamming down of phones, just a quiet goodbye, son, and the soft click of the connection ending. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. My phone buzzed a few times, text messages from Marcus that I didn't read. There would be more calls, more messages, more attempts at manipulation and guilt, but the hard part was over. For the first time in my adult life, I'd said no to Marcus Delwood, and the world hadn't ended. August 15th came and went. The sheriff's sale happened exactly as scheduled. Marcus lost the mansion, just as I'd predicted he would. The final sale price was $1.9 million, enough to cover what he owed the bank, but not much else. He moved into a rental apartment in Yonkers. 1 bedroom, normal-sized kitchen, no marble foyer to pace around in. His social media presence, which had been full of photos from mansion parties and business dinners, went silent. 3 months later, my phone rang on a Thursday evening. Marcus Delwood's name appeared on the screen, and after a moment of hesitation, I answered. Hello, Dad. Hi, Mitch. How are you doing? It was such a simple question, but it was the first time in years he'd asked it without immediately following up with a request for help or a description of his latest business venture. I'm good, Dad. How are you? I'm different, learning to be different. Good or bad? Too soon to tell, but definitely different. We talked for 20 minutes. Just talked. No mortgage crises, no business emergencies, no requests for money or technical support. He asked about my job, my apartment, whether I was dating anyone. Normal father-son conversation. When we hung up, I realized I was smiling. For the first time in years, Marcus Delwood had called his son just to be a father. It only took losing everything for him to figure out what mattered. Sometimes that's what it takes. 6 months after Marcus lost the mansion, I got an unexpected package in the mail. No return address, just my name, and Chicago apartment number written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside was a small wooden box and a note written on plain paper. Not the expensive letterhead Marcus used to favor. Mitch, found this while packing up the last of my things from storage. Thought you should have it. Dad. Inside the box was a baseball, signed and scuffed, with Mitchell's first home run, age 9 inches, written in faded marker. I'd completely forgotten about it. Marcus had been at that game, one of the few he'd actually attended, and afterward he'd convinced the umpire to let us keep the ball. He'd promised to get it properly mounted and displayed, but it had disappeared into the chaos of his office and I'd assumed it was lost forever. I turned the ball over in my hands, remembering that day. Marcus had been genuinely excited, more excited than I'd seen him about anything that wasn't business-related. He'd bought me ice cream after the game and spent the entire drive home talking about my swing, my timing, how proud he was. For one afternoon, I'd felt like the most important thing in his world. My phone rang the next evening. "Did you get the package?" "I did, thank you." I found a bunch of stuff like that. School papers you wrote that I kept, photos from family trips, report cards. I guess I saved more than I thought I did. This was new territory for us. Marcus talking about sentimental items, admitting he'd kept mementos of my childhood. The man who'd spent years focused only on the next deal suddenly sounding nostalgic. "How are you settling into the apartment?" "It's quiet, really quiet. I never realized how much noise that house made. The heating system, the pool equipment, all the maintenance crews. Here, I can actually hear myself think. Is that good or bad? Terrifying mostly, but maybe it's necessary." We've been having these conversations more frequently over the past few months. Short calls, usually in the evening, where Marcus would tell me about his day or ask about mine. No agenda, no underlying request for help, just a father talking to his son. "I've been seeing someone," he said suddenly. "Seeing someone?" "A woman. Her name is Carol. She works at the library near my apartment." This was definitely new. In all my years, I'd never known Marcus to date anyone seriously. After my mother died when I was 5, he'd thrown himself completely into work, claiming he didn't have time for relationships. "How did you meet her?" "I've been going to the library a lot, don't have much else to do during the day, and it's free. She helped me figure out how to use the computers there to look for jobs." Jobs. Marcus Delwood, looking for a job at 68. Any luck with that? Actually, yes. Part-time position at a property management company in White Plains. Nothing glamorous. Mostly showing apartments and handling maintenance requests. But it's honest work, and the pay covers my rent with a little left over. I almost didn't recognize this version of my father. Humble work, a modest apartment, dating a librarian. It was like he'd become a completely different person. "Are you happy, Dad?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. I could hear him thinking about it, really considering his answer. "I'm peaceful. For the first time in years, I'm not worried about making some massive payment or closing some crucial deal. I wake up, go to work, come home, read a book. Sometimes Carol and I go for walks or have dinner. It's simple. Simple sounds nice. It is. I spent so many years making everything complicated, thinking that complex meant successful. Turns out simple might be better." A year later, Marcus invited me to visit his apartment. Not to help with anything, not because he needed something, just because he wanted to see me. I took a long weekend and drove to New York. The apartment was tiny compared to the mansion, but it was actually decorated like a home instead of a showpiece. Family photos on the walls, books scattered around, a comfortable couch instead of formal furniture that looked impressive but felt like sitting on marble. Carol joined us for dinner that first night, and I understood immediately why Marcus was drawn to her. She was warm, intelligent, completely unimpressed by his former lifestyle. When he started to slip into old habits and began describing a, quote, fantastic investment opportunity he'd heard about, she just laughed and changed the subject. He still does that sometimes, she told me later while Marcus was cleaning up. Gets excited about some scheme to get rich quick. But he's learning that he doesn't need to get rich quick. He just needs to be content. That weekend, Marcus and I did something we'd never done before. We just spent time together. No business to discuss, no problems to solve, no hidden agendas. We went to a baseball game, walked around Central Park, had long conversations about nothing important. On Sunday, as I was getting ready to drive back to Chicago, Marcus walked me to my car. "Mitch, I owe you an apology." "Dad, we've been through this." "No, not for the birthday dinner, or the phone calls, or even asking you for money. I owe you an apology for making you choose between enabling me and losing me. That wasn't fair." I stopped packing my overnight bag and looked at him. "You were right to say no. If you'd given me that money, I'd have lost it within 6 months and then asked for more. I was drowning and I wanted you to drown with me instead of throwing me a life preserver." The life preserver was saying no. Exactly. And it took losing everything for me to understand that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" $85,000. I stared at him. "Dad, not for you to keep. I want to show you something." I opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check made out to the American Cancer Society for exactly $85,000. The insurance payout from selling the mansion was bigger than I expected. After I paid off my debts and got settled in the apartment, I had some money left over. I realized that this was exactly the amount I'd asked you for, so I decided to do something with it that would actually help people. "You donated the money you asked me for?" I figured if I was going to spend $85,000 I didn't earn, it should at least go somewhere useful. "Your mom died of cancer," seemed appropriate. I looked at the check, then at my father. This man who'd spent decades chasing money, who'd leveraged everything he owned to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford, had just given away more money than most people see in a lifetime. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely sure. For the first time in years, I'm making a decision that isn't about me, my image, or my bottom line. Feels good." That night, driving back to Chicago, I called Jake to tell him about the weekend. "So your dad went from asking you for $85,000 to donating $85,000. Pretty much. That's either the most impressive character development I've ever heard of, or he's planning the longest con in history." I laughed, but I understood Jake's skepticism. The transformation was almost too dramatic to believe. But over the following months, Marcus continued to prove that the change was real. He kept his modest job, stayed in his small apartment, and maintained his relationship with Carol. Most importantly, he kept calling me just to talk, kept asking about my life without any ulterior motive. 2 years after the foreclosure, Marcus called me with news. "Carol and I are getting married." "That's wonderful, Dad. I'm happy for you. We want you to be my best man." I paused, processing what he'd said. "You want me to be your best man? You're my son, Mitch. And more than that, you're the person who saved my life by refusing to enable my destruction. If that doesn't qualify you to stand beside me on the most important day of my new life, I don't know what does." The wedding was small, just Carol's children and grandchildren, a few friends from the library and Marcus's job, and me. No business associates, no network contacts, no one who was there because of what Marcus owned or what he could do for them. Just people who cared about Marcus and Carol as human beings. During his speech at the reception, Marcus said something that stuck with me. "I spent most of my life trying to be important to people who didn't really know me. It turns out it's much better to be loved by people who do." As I write this, Marcus has been living his new life for 3 years. He's 61 now, works part-time, lives simply, and calls me every Sunday just to check in. We talk about baseball, about his work stories, about Carol's grandchildren, normal stuff, father-son stuff. Sometimes he mentions missing aspects of his old life. The excitement of big deals, the rush of success, the feeling of being important in business circles. But he always follows it up by saying he doesn't miss the stress, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of financial collapse. I traded a life of impressive moments for a life of good days, he told me recently. Best deal I ever made. People ask me if I regret not helping him when he asked. The answer is simple: absolutely not. Giving Marcus that money wouldn't have saved him. It would have delayed his salvation by another year or two. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their self-destruction. My father had to lose everything that didn't matter to find the things that did. And now, for the first time in my life, I have a dad who shows up. Not because he needs something, not because it benefits him somehow, but just because that's what fathers do. It only took him 68 years to figure it out, but better late than never. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.